Okay, so we have looked at complex numbers and some of their basic properties and some applications. Right? Most of the material that we have covered so far has been in the nature of recall. We have all presumably seen these ideas at some point. So starting from this lecture, we will look at functions of a complex variable. Right? So we are familiar with functions of a real variable, notions of continuity, differentiability, and so on. So we will see that the extension of these ideas to functions of a complex variable, they come up with some special constraints appear naturally when we are working with functions of a complex variable. So we will discuss the notion of continuity in this lecture. Okay, so a complex variable, has a real part and an imaginary part. So it's really a, it's made up of two independent real variables, right? So if we want to make a function out of a complex variable, so in general, so I mean, the resulting answer will be also a complex number. So the resulting, the output of this operation would have a real part and an imaginary part. So it's customary to write it as f of z is equal to u of u, which itself is a function of both the real part and the imaginary part of the original complex variable, and the imaginary part of the function f of z itself is a function of both x and y. So we write it as f of z is equal to u of x comma y plus I times v of x comma y. Right. So if if u and v themselves are in some sense nice functions, we might expect that there is something smooth about the overall function f of z. So but we will see that special care is required. So you cannot simply put in any arbitrary u and any arbitrary v and expect that the function f of z is going to turn out with very nice properties which we care about for such functions, right? So let's analyze this carefully. So to do this, we'll first look at the notion of continuity, right? So what is our intuition about continuity from functions of a real variable? So it's the idea that there is nothing very jarring in the moment of function. As you change the real variable, so the value that the function takes at nearby points is basically the same, or small changes in the input will give you only small changes in the output, if you wish to think of it like that, right? So so x is your independent variable, and so then y would be a dependent variable, and so small change in x will result in a small change in y, right? So that's the idea of continuity intuitively. So when you're looking at a function of a complex variable, so we say that a function is continuous at a point z0 if all these three conditions hold. First of all, the limit of this function f of z at as z approaches z0 must exist, right? F of z0 itself must be well defined, and this limit z going to z0, f of z must be equal to f of z0, right? So this idea of taking the limit of a function is also something which requires some thought when we are working with complex functions, because the limit here is something that you can approach a certain point z0 in infinitely many directions. So if you're working with a real variable x, you can approach a point x0 either from the right or from the left, and so you would expect that the value of this function is the same whether you approach from the right or from the left. But here, so it's a little more involved. So the condition here is that the limit should be the same if no matter which direction you approach this point z0. And so if that is true, then the limit exists, and not only is it enough for the limit to exist, the value of the limit must be equal to the value of the function itself at that point, and then the function is continuous. So this seems like a very reasonable definition requirement for continuity, right? So Let's look at a few examples. So suppose we consider a simple function like f of z is equal to z squared, right? So indeed, intuitively we would expect this to be a continuous function at all all uh, points in the complex plane, and indeed it's true. So if you expand it out explicitly and write out the real and imaginary parts, right? So you write it as x plus iy the whole squared. So the real part is going to be x squared minus y squared, and the imaginary part is going to be 2xy. So straightforward to work this out. And so if you check the continuity of this function at the origin, so suppose you approach the origin along the real axis, right? So you imagine taking a point like epsilon plus I0, right? So you are on the real axis, so it's only epsilon that is a variable, so I always has 0 along with it. And so the approach, as we approach the origin, so this is the limit that we must consider. Limit as epsilon tends to 0 of f of epsilon plus I0, which is equal to limit epsilon tending to 0, just epsilon square, right? So the argument is just simply epsilon. And so indeed, as epsilon goes to 0, this is going to go to 0. So again, if you approach the origin but along the imaginary axis, we would consider the point like 0 plus I epsilon, slightly away from the origin but along the imaginary axis. And then you do the same exercise again, limit epsilon tending to 0, f of 0 plus I epsilon, which will now give you, when you square it, you get a minus sign. But since you're taking the limit epsilon going to 0, it doesn't matter whether you have a positive sign or a negative sign, so the value is 0. So indeed, you could have approached this origin in any of the other directions as well, and you can convince yourself that it would still give you the same answer. So to do that, you consider something like a displacement of r along a direction theta. So your z itself will be r times e to the I theta, and then if you take the limit r going to 0, we will see that as you take the limit r tending to 0, this function will take this value r squared times cos squared theta minus sin squared theta, plus you have I times 2 cos theta sin theta, right? So another way of seeing this is simply to write it as r squared e to the I 2 theta, right? So that's this is just an expanded version of r squared e to the I 2 theta. And indeed, as r goes to 0, it's going to be 0 regardless of which direction you approach it from. So theta can be anything and you will still get the same answer. So indeed, the limit exists, and it is so the value of f of z at 0 is 0. So indeed the function f of z is continuous at z equal to 0, but this is, you can verify that this function would be continuous everywhere, right? By carrying out a similar exercise but at a different point. So let's look at another example. So if we consider a function like f of z is equal to z divided by z star, right? So we have seen that z star is the complex conjugate, right? So complex conjugate is if you have the complex variable is x plus iy, z star would be x minus iy. So if you expand this out and write it out explicitly, so you can write this as z times z squared divided by z times z star. So multiply and divide through numerator and denominator. You multiply by z. So then the denominator becomes mod z squared, which is the same as x squared plus y squared. So then numerator has it's basically z squared, which we just worked out. So you have the numerator is x squared minus y squared plus I times 2xy. So you have the real part of this function is x squared minus y squared divided by x squared plus y squared, and the imaginary part is 2xy divided by x squared plus y squared. So now if you try to approach the origin, right? So let's approach the origin for this function along two directions. Suppose we start with on the real axis. If we consider a point like epsilon plus I0 and we approach the origin, so this limit will be epsilon tending to 0, f of epsilon plus I0, which will be just limit epsilon tending to 0, epsilon squared divided by epsilon squared, right? So in this case, so the imaginary part is just 0, so y is 0, so the imaginary part of this function itself immediately vanishes, and then you're just left with epsilon squared divided by epsilon squared. So as you tend epsilon to 0, it doesn't matter, it's just going to go to 1. But on the other hand, if you had approached along the imaginary axis, then you have to take this same limit epsilon going to 0, but of the function f of 0 plus I epsilon. 0 plus I epsilon means that y is epsilon, so x is 0, so you have once again the imaginary part is gone, but the real part now is going to be minus I epsilon squared will just give you epsilon squared, but the denominator will give you minus epsilon squared, right? So, and therefore the answer overall in the limit of epsilon going to 0 is just minus 1, right? So therefore we see that this limit of this function at the point z equal to 0, as you approach 0 from two different directions are different, right? It doesn't even matter, you don't have to consider some other direction. You could if you want, but establishing that any two directions, taking the limit gives you different values, immediately tells you that there is no continuity. The function is not continuous at that point, right? So this shows that you have to be careful with functions of a complex variable. So we have looked at two examples. One, a very simple benign type of a function where indeed continuity is clear, we might intuitively expect it, and indeed arguing carefully we have seen that it is continuous. And then we looked at another example where continuity is not possible at the origin, and so this we saw by looking at taking the limit carefully from two different directions and seeing that the values are different. So we will build on this notion of continuity, and we will come up with ideas of what differentiability is, and what conditions differentiability will impose upon the function and so on. So that's coming ahead in future lectures. That's all for this lecture. Thank you.